So we finally have beautiful weather, and that meant that yesterday I could finally plant some perennials and even a compact shrub. So that's what I'm going to show you in this video today. I'm going to show you beyond Pink'd Bluebeard, Amsonia Storm Cloud, Shooting Star Hellebores, and Geum Tempo Rose. I planted all of those yesterday. So I'm going to show you those and also discuss why I planted each one, what I love about them. I'm also going to talk to you about Peach Blossom Astilbe and Japanese Anemone Party Dress, which are two plants that I love but don't love me back. So I'm Laura, and this is Garden Sanity. And part of keeping your garden sanity is to plant things that you love but that also will love you back. If it's a one-sided relationship, you're coddling it, fussing over it, it's not working, dig it up and move on. Plant something else you'll love that will love you back, and that is key to keeping your sanity in the garden. You want plants that are going to work for you. And with that, I'm going to talk about the very first plant, which is Peach Blossom Astilbe. So I always wanted Peach Blossom Astilbe, and when we redid our landscape back in 2014, I wanted them in the yard, but I wanted them in more of a shady spot, and the landscapers insisted they belong in full sun. Now, Peach Blossom Astilbe is one of the astilbes that can take more sun. They're more sun tolerant, but they definitely need to be in shade, or at least partial shade. So, after arguing with the landscapers and me then thinking, well, they must know more than me, they're landscapers, I let them plant them in the sun. They got completely fried. So a few years ago, I finally moved them back into the backyard. And one was in full shade, and the other was in partial shade, partial sun, and the third one just was so bad I tossed it. Year after year, they just never lived up to my expectations. The blooms were gorgeous, as you see here in these pictures. But they were gorgeous for the short time they bloomed. It seemed like they bloomed for not even 2 weeks. And then they'd immediately turn brown. I mean, as you see here, these are what they looked like yesterday before I dug them up, and it's mid-August, and they're already brown and crispy, and yet they're touted as having winter interest, you know, that the blooms can stay on them in the winter. Now, maybe that's more true up in the colder zones, but down here in Zone 7, southern New Jersey, no way. So the first thing I needed to do was remove the Astilbe plants. So first I cut them down a little bit shorter just to make it easier to dig them up. And then I dug them up. Now, my impression might differ from yours about this plant, so go ahead and try them. I'm not trying to discourage you at all. I just wanted you to know that they didn't work out for me. And I love that plant, but this is an example of a one-sided relationship. So, what did I replace them with? Well, I left the spot that was in full shade. I left that blank for now. I just filled that in with some garden soil that I had and covered it back up with the mulch. I'll figure that out at another point. But what I did plant up front here is I planted beyond Pink'd Bluebeard. It's also called Caryopteris. It's a shrub, it's a compact shrub, and it's from Proven Winners. It's new this year, so you may or may not have seen it in garden centers, but you can order it online directly from Proven Winners, which is what I did. Now, bluebeards usually have purple bluish flowers. This is the first one that's been developed that has pink flowers. So Beyond Pink'd needs full sun. However, with how hot the sun is here, I don't think it's going to mind a bit of late afternoon shade. It does need soil that drains well. Can't get waterlogged. But they say it doesn't even need fertilizer. You know, it's just a really easygoing plant. It grows between 2 and 3 feet tall and wide, so I made sure I had enough space around it. It's a more compact shrub size, which is really nice. It's hardy in zones 7 to 9. It blooms late summer into mid-fall, and the color is just a gorgeous shade of pink. And here are some pictures. Thank you to Proven Winners for granting me permission so I could share these with you. And look at that color. It's just beautiful. I really, really, really love pink flowers in a fall garden. It's just an unexpected color. So many people plant warm colors for fall, like mums, asters, and most of those are in more reds, oranges, yellows. People think of that more traditionally, but pink flowers in a fall garden can be absolutely beautiful. Now, this is its first year. I actually bought this in the spring and it sat around. I just didn't know where I wanted to plant it. So then we had heat waves, etc., etc. So here's a helpful tip. When you're filming a video, you got to push the record button first. Before you do anything else, before you speak anything, push record. Guess who didn't do that yesterday? I did it for some things, and you'll see those in this video, but I had planned to show you the complete start to finish of me planting the Pink'd Bluebeard. So I set up the camera, I tested the angles to make sure, you could really see what I was doing, and then I forgot to push record, apparently, but I didn't know that. So I talked through the whole thing, I was showing you close-ups, all kinds of stuff, and then I went to see my good work. Yeah. Garden sanity, all-time low. So anyway, I don't know if I'm going to get any flowers this first year. We'll see. It got a little bit beat up sitting in a pot for so long. I just can't wait to see the beautiful pink flowers. I love pink flowers in fall gardens, which brings me to some pink flowers I'm getting rid of. So I love Japanese anemones, and I think all of them are beautiful. Years ago, and I'm talking like maybe 2009, I bought a variety called Party Dress, and you can see the pictures here. It was beautiful. It is beautiful. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous perennial. It starts out in probably around this time, mid-August, and for us here in southern New Jersey, Zone 7, it just keeps going. And if we have a mild fall, it goes sometimes into late October. And at first I planted them, and I had more of a wild garden back here, so as they started to spread, I thought, ooh, this is cool. But then I decided to do something with this garden, and the Japanese anemones didn't really get the message. They said, well, we still want to spread everywhere. And as I showed you in a video last fall, before I cleaned up this bed for the fall, it was kind of a mess. It looked kind of tired. I mean, as much as the blooms were pretty, I ended up pulling them all out. So this year I decided they got to go. I can't keep doing this every year. I think they're pretty, and then after about a couple of weeks of that, I start hating them again. So you see all these leaves. This is all Japanese anemone. Now I came out in the springtime with a digger, and I dug up as many roots as I could. But it's almost next to impossible. I say almost because it isn't impossible, and I'm determined. So this patch is still going strong here. I will come back in and dig it up. And by the way, Japanese anemone isn't an example of a plant that doesn't love you back. It actually loves you back too much, and that can also be a bad kind of relationship. You want your space. So keeping with the pink flower theme, I also added Tempo Rose Geum, sometimes called Geum Tempo Rose. Either one is right. I'm finally adding another variety of geum to my gardens. I already have Totally Tangerine, which I love, and now I wanted another long blooming one. Now, in the video on deadheading geums, I mentioned some long blooming ones. I actually did not mention this one, but it also is a really good choice. This variety was developed by Terra Nurseries. So I'm really excited to try it out because they've done a lot with GM research and developing different varieties and hybrids. So I ordered these plants from White Flower Farm. And here you can see the plants, what they look like shortly after I received them. Yes, they're small, but there's many advantages of ordering small sizes, including fitting them in between your spring bulbs when they're planted underground and you can't see them. And I've got bulbs all over this bed, daffodils everywhere. So I looked at my pictures and my video that I've taken in the past, and I was able to know exactly where to plant these. So you can see when I got the plants, they did have some of the pretty blooms on them. They're kind of a rose pink, but I also wanted to show you what the plants are going to look like once they're fully mature and in full bloom. Gorgeous, right? And thanks to Terra Nurseries, they granted me permission so I could share these photos with you, and I really appreciate it. So I wanted to give them a shout out. They're a great company. So Tempo Rose Geum begins blooming in spring, and it's going to go into early summer. It's going to have its first flush during that time, and it blooms for a long period, but it's also going to continue to bloom sporadically throughout the rest of the summer, similar to what Totally Tangerine Geum does. You know, it dies back a little bit, not dies back, but the blooms kind of cease in the heat of the summer, and then they're going to start up again when the weather cools down. So I'm really looking forward to that. So this particular geum is hardy in zones 5 to 9. It needs full sun, and it also needs moist soil, but soil that drains well. So I can put it in a similar area to the Beyond Pink'd Bluebeard, and it'll be just fine. Keep in mind that it's a shorter geum. It's only going to be about 8 inches tall by 12 inches wide when it matures. When this geum is in flower, however, the flower stalks can reach up to about 21 inches tall. approximately. When I saw that figure, I was like, really? All of them? They measure it? But anyway, I'm sure it's around 20 inches tall, 21. You know what? I'll be sure to measure them when they pop out next year. The plants are great for pollinators. And what's really nice is they're deer and rabbit resistant. And for me, any plant that's rabbit resistant is good. And I already know rabbits don't like the totally tangerine geum, so this is a plant that I can plant with confidence. So I'm going to have pink color in spring with the Tempo Rose geum, and then I'm also going to have late summer into fall color, a slightly different shade of pink with the Beyond Pink'd Bluebeard. I'm a happy gal. By the way, a second ago, I actually got hit with an acorn. So either there's squirrels up above that are, I don't know, wanting me out of here? I don't know, it's very strange. I did yell at them the other day for digging in pots. Who knows? So here's a funny story. Last fall, in my perennial plant spacing video, which I'll link to above and below in the description area, I used this plant as my example of how to properly space your perennials. And I considered at the time and in the video I discussed planting it in this very garden bed. But then I decided on a different garden bed. But here I am, and I purchased another one from Proven Winners to plant it in this bed in the same spot that I discussed before after all. This is a gorgeous spring blooming perennial, but it's very slow growing, so please keep this in mind, otherwise you might get really, really frustrated. Here's what the storm cloud looks like that I planted in the other bed here in the backyard. And I planted that a year ago, and as you can see, it's probably about the same size as the one I just planted from Proven Winners. So it's slow growing, but once it grows, it's going to look absolutely amazing. But first, so you can see, here's what it looked like shortly after it arrived from Proven Winners. And this was after its spring blooming time. So Amsonia Storm Cloud's often compared to a shrub because it can grow to approximately 3 feet tall and wide. So again, this was why I used it in that proper plant spacing video, because it's a perennial that does require more space around it, and it's a way to just remind you to pay attention when you're planting these things so you don't get too crowded, or your plants don't get too crowded. So I planted this in front of the little quickfire shrubs, which will eventually be around 4 or 5 feet tall. It'll take a few years, both for the little quickfires to grow and for the Amsonia to grow. But imagine the pretty spring pale blue periwinkle colored flowers of the Amsonia in front of the developing green leaves of the hydrangeas in spring. That is going to be gorgeous. So Amsonia Storm Cloud is hardy in zones 4 to 9. It can take full sun to partial sun. And you got to check out these pictures. Look at how this is going to look once it's mature. Wow. They start out with olive green stems, really dark olive. And then they get these pretty flowers, and my goodness. And then the rest of the season, you have a nice green shrub, and they will develop some yellow color in the fall. Not much, but a little bit. So the Amsonia Storm Cloud doesn't look too healthy right now, and that's because I kind of kept it in a pot way too long. You can see some of the leaves are more green back here, but hopefully it'll start greening up. And by the way, the one that I showed you that's in the other garden bed, not too long ago, my husband was out here with me looking around, and he asked what the weed was. I'm not kidding you. He's like, oh, I just thought you just hadn't pulled it out yet. Ah, yeah. This is why I do the weeding. I first saw these at the 2019 Philadelphia Flower Show, and I've been looking for them ever since. So I was super thrilled to grab the last two at a garden nursery south of me in the spring. However, even though I bought them in the spring, I didn't know exactly where I was going to plant them. I already have Candy Love Hellebores in this bed, and they're in the perfect spot. But I didn't know where I wanted to plant the shooting stars. So I decided to plant these behind the Blue Star Calamaris and on either side of the Kramer's Red Winter Heath. As well as in front of the Amsonia Storm Cloud. Now the Kramer's Red Winter Heath is something that used to be, I think there were 2 or 3 shrubs back here, and they got so overgrown, and that wasn't so much the problem as the rabbits made nests in there every spring. They did it every fall. I don't know, whenever they make bunnies. It seems like they make them all the time, but they constantly used it to hide in to have their babies, so I had no choice but to rip the whole thing out. However, after I cut everything back, I saw some fresh new growth right on the edges of this little stump, and so I left it in the ground, wanted to see what it would do. And in this case, it came back beautifully. It's really small, as you can see, and the bright green little dots that you see on the shrub, those are all the flower buds that are forming that are going to bloom all winter. And by the way, this tree fared really well in the recent storms. I pruned back a lot of it, as you can see, like right here. I did a video on it just, I don't know, I think it was just last week, where I came out and cut them all off before a storm, and it held up fine, so I didn't have any broken branches. So if you are suffering from that, even if it's a limelight shrub, look at that video as a way to maybe help your shrubs out. So that's everything I planted yesterday. But it's another gorgeous day today, so I'm definitely going to be outside today too. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about hellebores, watch this video next that's on the screen. It's going to tell you everything you need to know. They're very easy to grow, and it will give you beautiful flowers in the middle of winter when not much else is going on. Until next time, happy gardening.